the resurrection has good historical evidence behind it, and here I'm going to show what some of that historical evidence is. But first, we're going to have to go to the earliest source we have on the resurrection. There's a creed in 1 Corinthians 15 dated to 1 to 3 years after Christ died, and here you can see all the historians who dated at that time. So this is the creed. The creed itself is in red, but the rest of the remaining parts are, Paul's writings. And so you can see that this creed says that Jesus died, that he was buried, and that he rose again. And so this means bodily resurrection. That's why it mentions burial and rising. So because it's mentioning bodily resurrection. It also mentions numerous witnesses, and at the end even has Paul establishing himself as a witness. After this, the disciples went to their deaths proclaiming this resurrection. And we know that this resurrection, the belief of the resurrection, took place very early from all those scholars. So, what can we do with this information? Well, even non-Christian scholars have gotten a certain amount of consensus on these different facts. For example, Gerhard Ludermann says it may be taken as historically certain that Peter and the disciples had experiences after Jesus' death in which Jesus appeared to them as the risen Christ. And Paula Fredrickson says, in their own terms, they saw the raised Jesus. That's what they said, and that's what all the historical evidence we have attest to their convictions that that's what they saw. All these are historical bedrocks, facts known past doubting about the earliest community after Jesus. And even Bart Ehrman maintains that it is a historical fact that Jesus' followers came to believe that he had been raised from the dead soon after his execution. We know some of these believers by name. One of them, the Apostle Paul, quite plainly claims to have seen Jesus alive after his death. And even one of the most prominent atheist philosophers of the 20th century said that the evidence for the resurrection is better than for claimed miracles in any other religion. It is outstandingly different in quality and quantity, I think, from the evidence offered for the occurrences of most other supposed miraculous events. And so what we have here is we have historians across the board saying that the disciples really did believe they saw Jesus. And we also have atheists, the most prominent atheist philosophers of the 20th century. He's actually converted to theism later in life, but he was one of the most prominent atheist philosophers of the 20th century, saying that the resurrection has more evidence than any other miracle in history. And I think that the best evidence we have attests to the resurrection happening, and the resurrection maintains as the best explanation for the historical facts.